Have you ever walked down a street and wondered what happened here? Or perhaps sat in your backyard and thought, who lived here and why did they leave? Well, there's a good chance that your town or city has its own unsolved mystery that people still talk about today. And if you stick around until the end of this video, we may help you discover one that's hidden in plain sight near where you live. We'll start with a small town in Nebraska called Friend. It's just 20 minutes from the Kansas border, but it was here that the state's most notorious crime occurred. On the morning of December 4, 1919, a schoolteacher named Mary P. Baseline was discovered dead inside her home. Her lifeless body was found lying next to her overturned desk, suggesting she had been writing something when she was suddenly interrupted. The killer had struck her at least twice on the head with a blunt object, and her house had been ransacked. With few leads, investigators were unable to find out who would want to harm Mary, but locals believed it might have been one of the several escaped convicts in the area. After all, Nebraska had just experienced a crime wave, which saw over 150 banks and trains robbed in only 3 years. One theory suggested that Mary had actually witnessed a train robbery that occurred nearby weeks before and had been killed to stop her from testifying in court. Unfortunately for the police, no one could confirm this, and so the case went cold. Several similar crimes across the state took attention away from Mary's murder, and her family eventually moved out of town, leaving behind a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Now, unless you live in Nebraska, chances are you're probably safe from copycat train robbers and axe murderers. But what about ghosts? If you live in or around the English coastal town of Comer, you may be sharing a home with a spirit who never left. In 1877, two brothers named John and Thomas Deal began constructing a pier here. After spending £1,600 of their own money, they opened it to the public in hopes that holiday makers would enjoy the new structure. But just a year later, a storm tore through the coast, causing significant damage to the pier and killing one young girl. Although the pier remained open, visitors quickly reported hearing strange sounds and seeing a ghostly little girl wandering along the planks. A few even claimed to have seen the girl fall into the water and disappear. As time went on, these sightings became more frequent, and some say that the ghost is still there today. It's rumored that the pier is haunted by the spirit of a boy who died during construction, and some have claimed that the sound of footsteps can be heard when no one is around. Let's move across the pond and look at the American Midwest. If you live in the fictional town of Hollow Well, you might not know that you're living inside a horror story. That's because Hollow Well, Maine is actually based on the events that occurred in the real town of in 1884. A series of bizarre crimes swept through the town, beginning with the disappearance of George and Minnie Morrow. Their son Albert noticed that his parents hadn't shown up for work at their usual jobs and decided to visit their house. But upon arriving, he found a horrific scene. The house had been completely emptied and destroyed. Furniture was broken, drawers were pulled out, and a couple was nowhere to be found. Even more disturbing, there was no sign of a struggle or forced entry. Police investigated further and discovered that the couple's life savings were missing, leading them to believe that they had run away together. However, this was quickly disproven as their bodies were found buried in the cellar. With evidence of a violent struggle now present, it seemed the couple had been murdered. While George's death was quick, Minnie had been stabbed several times and had tried to defend herself. Unfortunately, justice was never served. No arrests were made and the case remains unsolved. This horrifying tale of murder soon inspired Stephen King to write his novella Different Seasons, which was later adapted into the film Shawshank Redemption. And while the events depicted in the film are fictional, it's clear that King drew inspiration from the real crimes of Hollow Well, Maine. If you're living in an old apartment building, then you might be sharing your home with more than just other tenants. Take the case of the Dakota in New York City, a 15-story luxury building built in 1884. Here, each apartment was designed to be larger than the last. And although the building started out housing some of the wealthiest people in the country, It didn't take long for things to change. Just a few decades after opening, several murders and unexplained deaths occurred within the building. In 1903, a wealthy department store owner named Marjorie Post was found dead in her bedroom. Despite there being no signs of forced entry or a struggle, her jewelry and money were missing, leading the police to suspect a robbery gone wrong. Then, just a year later, a stockbroker named Benjamin Metch was discovered dead in his apartment, having fallen out of his window. Was this an accident, suicide, or something more sinister? Well, the truth may shock you. In 2016, a woman bought an old photo of her great-great-grandparents who used to live in the Dakota. Upon closer inspection, she discovered that the image had been taken in the same spot where photographer Bruce Davidson stood just 4 years ago for a Time magazine article. And when she flipped the photo over, she found that it had been dated 1947. So how can one photo show to people from different time periods? Well, some believe that the Dakota may be hiding a portal to another dimension, or perhaps these images are proof that ghosts walk among us. Now let us go back in time and take a look at one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of the early 20th century. Imagine you're walking down a busy street when you hear the sound of gunshots. As you turn toward the commotion, you see a man standing over the body of his best friend, holding a bloody knife and yelling for someone to call the police. This unbelievable scenario actually played out in 1924, except it happened right in the middle of Chicago. At the time, 27-year-old Ruth Snyder was engaged to be married and expecting a child. She was last seen alive getting into a car with her husband, Joseph, and her secret lover, Henry Judd. Shortly after, Joseph called the police and told them that he had just found Ruth's body and that he believed she had been the victim of a random attack. However, witnesses claimed to have seen Joseph acting suspiciously around the time of the murder. He was also seen carrying a large amount of life insurance for Ruth, which led the police to believe that he was responsible for her death. What followed was a media frenzy as the details of the case became public. People were shocked to learn that the young woman everyone thought was happily engaged was actually cheating on her fiancé. But what happened next was even more surprising. During the trial, Joseph testified that he had nothing to do with Ruth's murder, claiming that he had been framed by her lover, Henry. The case against him quickly fell apart as the prosecution was unable to produce enough evidence for a guilty verdict. But that doesn't mean that they got away scot-free. Today, you can visit the site of Ruth's death at the corner of North State Street and East Chestnut Street. And every Valentine's Day, people leave red roses on her grave. Meanwhile, the actual killer was never caught. So, if you're watching this video while sitting in your room, just remember, you might be sharing a wall with an unsolved mystery. All it takes is a little imagination to uncover the secrets hiding in plain sight. We'd love to hear from you. If you live in a place where something strange or mysterious happened, tell us about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our others for more amazing historical tales.